Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week. From a punting perspective, we were cooking in round 21, 4-0 sweep on best bets. That makes us 41 and 30 for the season, 58%. And that is with the Raiders minor premiership bet pending as well. And that's into, I think, about $1.30. You've had setbacks for the Storm and Bulldogs with injuries or defeats. We'll get to that because I'm going to do a lightning recap of round 21, including the 4 best bet results. And I thought I'll actually do that after best bets in case I spend more than 5 minutes on that. Let me know your biggest takeaways from round 21. Yourselves, guys, are always really value and appreciate your company on a Tuesday night or whenever you do catch this throughout the week. And as I put up the best bets for round 22, guys, I think I've got 3. I'm going to put up the bat signal again because it's pretty hard to find bookies that want to sponsor a show that's genuinely winning and has people following it that are having great punting results. But I'm not going to make the show any other way. So that's just the predicament I'm in. If you value the show, if you value the best bets like what we just had around 21, right, and you happen to be watching or listening right now, you live in Australia, you're over 18, of course, and you are one of the few who don't have Dabble, I'm going to put up the ways you can contact me. If you are interested in getting an account this month, you can message Jacob Wynn on Facebook, TryPod_betting on Instagram, or TryPodBetting@gmail.com on email. I can't tell you publicly what I can do for you. You've just got to be someone interested in jumping on, and then you can talk to me privately if you are willing to do that with the code TryPod, and I can give you more information at that point in time, and then you do what's best for you. But it would help me. So if you're ever sort of sitting back thinking you'd like to help the pod, I don't ask for much help. But one thing we've always spoken about for 11 years, we've been very consistent, that you want multiple reliable bookies to provide you more opportunities to get the best price, get the best number so that you win more frequently than you possibly could if you just stick to one shop. And I hope that this show can go on so we can continue to give you best possible advice and best possible tips. Hopefully, it's been tough times, but if you are able to help, then reach out to me and let's chat. And with that, let's talk about round 22 best bets, and you can let me know in the comments what you think of these. I am going my Fins minus 1.5 at $1.90 over in New Zealand. Now, that is on Dabble, and I just think the Dolphins are the better side, as good as New Zealand have been this season, notwithstanding the loss last week. With the personnel available and some inclusions coming in for the Fins who are off the bye, I think that they get the win over New Zealand. It's a really important game for my Fins, who are either 7th or 8th, but right on the precipice of top 8. Of course, it's important for the Warriors too. I'll get into it, but I think the Dolphins should be a more significant favourite. Then I'm going later Friday night, Broncos to win both halves against the Bunnies, and that's $1.82 on Ladbrokes and Neds. Broncos, big slip up at home to Para, and now you're in a similar spot. You're a 3-try favourite at home. The Bunnies are decimated, and we'll get into just how bad, how dire it is for Souths, whilst Brisbane's full strength. So I think Brisbane won't take Bennett's boys lightly there. $1.82 to win comprehensively, to win both halves. I mean, you can theoretically win the game by 2 points, or you could win the game by 4 points. You could win both halves. If Brisbane's up big at halftime, I'm still going to be pretty confident that Brisbane continues to roll. So that's my favourite way to play that one. As Luke says, did the Fins flip to favourites? Funny you say that. Yes, it is a flipped favourite. Luke, about half an hour ago, you could still get plus 2.5 on the Fins at 365, but they were asleep. Everyone else had moved the Fins into favouritism. And I was going to tip the plus 2.5, but it was available now. But I check at the very last second. I only give you guys what is still on the board. And I've already seen someone comment this. You picked it. It was Peter. He said, best bet Chooks line. Yes, I'm going to take the Roosters plus 2.5 at $1.90 on Dabble, on Ladbrokes and Neds against Manly. I'll rate the Roosters. They've let some results slip. It could still be very costly come the end of the year. And as you know, I'm not that high on Manly. And we won very well against them last week. And Manly's had their moments for sure. But it's a good test of my hypothesis that I think the Roosters are the stronger side. And I'm getting 2.5 points in a game where I think the Tricolours should be favourites. So that's how I see it. Of course, we get into a greater detail with each best bet and each game. Before I jump into round 22 then, let's go lightning round because you can already see it on the screen. So we won our first best bet of round 21. We had the Roosters first half line. We were getting 2.5. In fact, the Roosters led by 2 or 4 at halftime. I mean, we did need a late try in the half off a spilled kick. So I would say we got a good dose of luck there. But really, this was anybody's game. So I was on the right line of thinking. And yes, Jerome Hughes got injured, but he did get injured second half. So it didn't help my best bet in any way. And I thought at the point that Jerome Hughes was out, and other reasons why I was on the Roosters was no Pappy, no Munster. I thought the Storm were buried there. At one stage, I think it was an 8-point lead to the Roosters. But the Storm came surging back. Tupou, usually so reliable. He spills that put down that probably was the difference. Harry Grant, masterpiece, and a huge win for the Storm, despite the fact that their reigning Dalian medalist had to go to hospital. But the news is as good as it probably could have been, with a bad dislocation but no break or structural damage. And they're saying Jerome Hughes is out. What's the latest you guys have heard? I've heard around 5 to 6 weeks, it looks like, which still means he can be part of that, finals campaign. Then on Friday, another best bet winner. We had Cowboys over 4.5 tries. The Cowboys had 5 tries by half time. So we're winners at Oranges there after 40 minutes. The final score 38-32. So I pretty much did nail that handicap, saying two teams that essentially their season was over the week before, and they're just playing a different brand of footy now, and not as much care factor, and just letting it loose. And that's how you get sort of 70 combined points. Same old story for the Dragons. Close, but no cigar. Then this was a surprise, and I admit when I'm wrong. I mean, I was close to Brisbane 13+, right? And I'm happy I left it alone because it felt a little bit too square, and you felt that Para could get a bump from Moses back, and boy, did they. But to get the win, I did not see that coming at Suncorp against essentially a full-strength Brisbane. And that's why I'm betting on Brisbane this week, because I don't think history is going to repeat here. But this was a wild game. Parramatta so brave, and then Brisbane thinks they've won it at the end. The try is awarded after the kick in behind from Shibasaki spilled. My heart broke for Papali, first start at fullback, and he had a great game. And then, of course, as you've all seen, Walsh is caught just offside, and that was a controversial moment the night before when a try to the Roosters was allowed. But everyone kept going on about Teddy being offside, but I was like, well, the Roosters lost anyway. Like, who cares? But if you get a call wrong and it actually decides the game, that is pretty bad. And we don't want this to happen in a really high-stakes game, like a finals game. Although there was actually an argument that Teddy was onside by one camera angle. Anyway, I sort of had a bit of fun with camera angles and put up a bit of a satirical post. And if you saw on any of the TryPod social media, that post with the blue line that was possibly a bit skew-if, suggesting Walsh actually was onside and that the Broncos were robbed. The funny thing is, unironically, I've actually had people messaging me saying, can Brisbane launch an argument and get the 2 points? So it's funny how people see things different ways. But the Eels deserve to win that. Incredibly brave. Would have been heartbreaking for Para had they lost it at the end. The Eels got the reward for coming in and fighting when on paper they had no right to be in that match. And you can say similar about the Titans the following day. I did warn you, New Zealand fans, that this is the kind of game you let slip. I don't know why. The Titans are a bogey team for the Warriors. You get the miracle finish in Newcastle. You play the Titans at home, who are coming last, who have been embarrassed week in, week out, and who are missing their best player and captain Tino. And yet the Titans, just high completion, did Des proud, and the Warriors, very underwhelming. A team that is still fourth, and really the way they set their season up, will be desperate to remain in the 4 and then see what can happen in the finals and guarantee yourselves 1, if not 2, home final matches. But if the Warriors miss out on top 4, you're definitely going to rue not taking advantage of just an opposition and a spot like that where there's really no excuse. Warriors on their game win that one, but we've seen it too many times when you expect the Warriors to win. They'll quite often let you down. It was a letdown for the Tigers after getting that win that probably relieved the pressure that there's not going to be a 4th straight spoon incoming. I was worried about that exhale factor, and that's what you got. Penrith, 7 wins on the trot and 36-2. I know this game blowout late when It was like 12-2, I want to say, just before halftime. And then Penrith scores like on the stroke of halftime, which really was crushing for the Tigers. And Benji said he could tell the team was deflated. But I mean, come on, like it's part of the job. The coach's job is to lift them up and get out there and fight again in the second half. And the second half was more of the same. Panthers punishing the Tigers. Saturday night, another like fair surprise and nearly an upset. Sharks were playing with their food a bit, I thought, at 14-12, just refusing to sort of put the bunnies away, and it ends up getting really tight late, though Cronulla does still get the win at Gosford, and I didn't have a play on that one. So far I'd had 2 plays and we had 2 winners, and then on Sunday we had the back-to-back winners with the blowout games. Raiders 44-18. Now, fair play, this was 18-all at half-time. I thought that the Knights would have been disappointed to give up a try with 90 seconds to go in the half, but then an intercept out of nothing and suddenly it's level at the break. But you know what? I did kind of say that in my preview that the best I could see Newcastle doing would be fighting tough for 50 or 60 minutes, and I could still see the Raiders winning by a couple of tries. We laid 12.5. We laid 13.5 as the best bet, and the Raiders won the second half 26-0. So comfortable enough. Similar story to Raiders Eels the week before. We also did lay the points with the Green Machine, who sit top of the ladder. And then Bulldogs 42 destroyed the Seagulls. Again, it was probably closer in the first 40. What was it? Was it only 12-4 at halftime? But then just a procession second half, and the best bet was Bulldogs minus just 2.5. And that line did not make sense to me. We didn't overthink it. We laid it with the Bulldogs. And that's as easy as you like way to sweep the week. Let me bring in some of your comments. I mean, the other one is Olakuatu getting injured in that game, re-injuring his shoulder, but I was going to bring that up when we do preview the Manly game, where I'm going best bet against Manly again. Colt says, Hughes aiming to be back on the eve of finals. Luckily, no surgery gives him a chance. Adam, what's the motivation for Raiders at this point? I would say you want to sew up the minor prem. Now, a more savvy or experienced premiership contender might say there's no difference between coming first or second as long as you're at home first week of the finals. But actually, that's not true this year, because if the Warriors get in fourth, you'd definitely rather host the Warriors than host, take your pick, Bulldogs or Storm. So the motivation for the Raiders is they definitely want to secure top spot. And the Bulldogs and Storm are, for the most part, going to keep winning, right? And there's I think it's still only a 2 or 4 point gap. Oh, I won't go searching. Someone tell me how far ahead are the Raiders at the moment? They're either 1 or 2 wins ahead. Like you let one slip and suddenly you've got somebody else nipping at your heels. And as Luke says, the Raiders haven't won a minor premiership for 35 years. So that was, 1990 or 91. And did that Raiders team go on to win the Prem as well? Like that, obviously the Raiders had an amazing team in the 90s. Colt, Eels were the better team, deserved it. Totally agree. More Warriors on the Gold Coast than in New Zealand, which is why they're the bogey team. I've got my theory on that as well. I was going to bring that up later too. Bunnies team total unders looks good. Well, yeah, and the way I'm playing it is just going to be Brisbane to win both halves. Raiders cover more frequently when they are even at halftime. Like, it does still blow my mind that I was on for a best bet the Raiders the day they were up 20-0 at home and they actually lost that one, and yet they can win games by 20 or 30 when they're down. But that's been this season to a degree. The Titans may never lose again. And the sad thing is, if the Titans didn't lose again this year, they still wouldn't make the finals. Tigers supporter, hurt to watch that. Dragons at home might want it more than Raiders this week. Look, that's a fair comment, Adam, and I'm going to get to that game. Raiders win the comp this year. They're the only team that's won games multiple ways. Luke, 1990, pretty sure, or yes, that the Raiders won. And Corey, thank you. The Raiders are 2 wins ahead from the Dogs. And I'm pretty sure, confirmed to me though, are the Raiders 2? They might have 2 more wins than the Dogs, but the Raiders have an extra bye coming up. So am I right in thinking the Raiders are only 2 points ahead of the Dogs? Because I did sort of mix that up when I gave out that minor premiership bet, but we're still in a great position. And the Raiders and Dogs also both have like a really similar points differential. So if the Storm gets level with the Raiders, the Storm would actually finish higher. If the Raiders and Bulldogs are level, it's going to be like a coin flip, and that's where winning some of these games by a big margin correct, Corey, as in it's only 2 points. So there you go. If the Raiders lose, the Bulldogs could be top of the ladder. Am I correct in saying that? Let's get into round 22, guys, and we can touch on some of those teams again. The first game of the round is Parramatta against Melbourne at CommBank. And thank you for confirming, Corey. Yeah, Raiders are only 2 points ahead of the Bulldogs at this stage. One other factor with the reason the minor premiership bet is really good, though, is the Dogs and Storm do play each other in a couple of weeks. So obviously, I said for the most part, Melbourne and Canterbury will keep winning, but they can't both win that game. So that's going to give Canberra a good chance for separation. And you look all the way to the end of the year, maybe the Raiders would like the luxury of being able to rest in the final game with the minor prem already sewn up, and then you can just, go balls to the wall for the finals. All right, I could obviously just riff easily for another 15 or 20 minutes, but how about we go game by game? So we have Storm as a 10.5-point favourite here on the road. Both of these teams had narrow wins. Parramatta got their halfback back into the team, which was, of course, pivotal against Brisbane, and select the same side this week, although Tuolungi is in the reserves because he's eligible to return from suspension. So Melbourne lost Jerome Hughes, as you know. However, Munster is back from personal leave, and Pappenhausen, who's had this calf complaint, returns at fullback. Wishart is the halfback. Liero is going to get a post-origin spell with Kamikamica named at lock, as you can see there. Parra, very brave. Again, avoid that heartbreak. Like, that could have rattled Parra, but instead they get the reward for 80 minutes of incredible effort in Brisbane. And it shows that the former Storm assistant Riles is having an impact. To get a result like that when you are down on troops against a talented Brisbane that was flying. But I want to say as well, the Storm were incredibly impressive against the Roosters, okay? And I do want to actually just go for a sidebar here. Straight after the game, now, mind you, a lot of us thought that Hughes was out for the season. When he did his shoulder, and he was in incredible pain. And then they said, no, they couldn't even get it back in. He had to go to hospital. And often that does mean structural damage. And the longer it's out, the more complications, right? And all of us are thinking, wow, everyone had to agree the Storm were the rightful premiership favourites. They might not be top of the ladder, but they're most likely to win the comp this year. It's, I wouldn't go as far as say it's their comp to win, but they're the strongest side in the competition. I don't think you had much sort of debate about that. And then we all start thinking, without Hughes, it brings the Storm back to the pack for sure. And it does make it a bit more open. But I heard multiple pundits and experts say, if Hughes isn't back this year, write the Storm off. You can put a line through the Storm. The Storm can't win without Jerome Hughes. And I just think if anyone said that, or for those who did say it, you are insane. I mean, this team was down 8 points against a really good Roosters that needed to win at Allianz with no Pappenhausen, no Hughes, no Munster, and still came back and won that game. You've got Wishart, who's the best backup half in the comp. You've got Harry Grant that was phenomenal. Now you get Pappy and Munster back in. Like, of course, without Hughes, they're not as good, but to write them off and say they can't win the comp, and now it's sort of maybe a moot point because Hughes, the injury wasn't as bad and he should be back for finals. And the Storm were $2.70 to win the premiership. Straight after the injury, they went out to $3.50. Then when you heard it was only going to be 4 to 6 weeks for Hughes, you still could get $3.50 about the Storm, which I thought $3.50 reflected he's not playing finals, but you could actually, that just shows it's not a perfectly efficient market. You can still back $3.50. I looked again today, the Storm's back into $3.10. And that's in a weekend where like Penrith looked awesome, Bulldogs looked awesome, Raiders looked awesome. Okay. But yeah, for those who were saying no Hughes, no chance for the Storm, I mean, you tell me which other team is clearly better than Melbourne and would definitely beat Melbourne in the finals. You can say other teams have a chance against them, but like writing Melbourne off, I thought was crazy work. I mean, I don't want to name and shame people. I mean, Hindy said it straight after the game on Matty Johns. Maybe that's the emotion of it being straight afterwards. But several others I heard as well. Okay, these two, Parramatta and Melbourne, they met in round one, and it was a baptism of fire for Riles. I think Melbourne put on over 40 in the first 40 minutes from memory, right? So first half alone was like 44-4. But I do look at the Eels as, are they one of these teams that's sharp to back for the back end of the year because they're going to be frisky, because there's no weight of expectations on Para. They've had an injury ravaged campaign. They've got a new coach. He's going to be there next year, so everyone's still playing for him. Everyone's still striving for improvement, and the team is pulling together. But meanwhile, the market's mostly written Para off because they languish, towards the bottom of the ladder. And those are sometimes the sides that you actually just you want to back late in the year because it looks like they've got nothing to play for, but they actually give great effort. That's the argument for Parramatta. Then you look at Melbourne, gave up 30 points last week. Bellamy hates that. Would they be more defensive-minded this week, perhaps? But to be fair, if you look a little closer, the Roosters had 5 tries. I think 4 of them were from kicks. So I suppose you can focus on your kick defense, but there is a little bit of randomness that comes with that, especially a couple of them were fumbled kicks. Last week was a rare occasion where I faded Melbourne. I have a high opinion of Melbourne and I rarely want to go against them, though I did first half with the Roosters and we got that win, which was nice, but I'm not interested in getting out in front of Melbourne again. They're a different beast with Pappy at the back. He can break a game wide open at any moment. And it's just hard to know at what point this game might break open, or has Para got an encore performance in him perhaps? I haven't played this one, but the Undertaker has. Let's have a listen.
G'day guys, Matty here, a sharpshooter, firing blanks at the moment, not having a good run lately, but we'll try and get back on track this week. My bet of the week will be either team 1-12 in Parramatta versus Melbourne. With Moses back, Parramatta are such a different outfit, so it's so much more competitive. It's actually going to be really wet in Sydney this weekend, starting tomorrow, all through the weekend. It's going to be windy and rainy, so I do trust Parramatta to stick within 2 converted tries. I'll take the risk that Parramatta don't blow out the Storm. That's unlikely, but we do take that risk, but we do get $2.15, the nice plus money, and we do get that extra key 2 points going from 10.5 to 12.5, which is pretty important. So, going to take the plus money on a competitive game, no blowout, but we got some wiggle room there either way. Good luck.
Brave by The Undertaker, but respect it. Let's move to Friday. Warriors, Dolphins. Line is -1.5 or -2.5. My best bet is Dolphins -1.5, $1.90 on Dabble Ladbrokes. Oh, no, it's on Dabble. And I think $1.87 it's on Sportsbet as well. Sorry, Ladbrokes and Eds is a different book here. Is a different best bet. I think Ladbrokes and Eds have already moved this line to 3.5. It's at Go Media Stadium, and it is a huge game. So let me just set the table for you. The way the ladder is poised, it really does look to me like top 4 is going to be decided by one game either way. New Zealand's not going to comfortably be in the top 4. I think they'll have sides nipping at their heels right down to round 27, maybe need to win in round 27. And New Zealand plays at Manly, who might need to win to make finals. But anyway, that's a long way away. But it really is going to go down to the wire for top 4. And you can say the same about the top 8. The Dolphins had the bye. They are in the 8, but you've still got the Roosters and Manly very much alive and trying to leapfrog them there. So don't say I didn't warn you about the Warriors, right? We talked about that you're playing a hapless, downtrodden Titans. No Tino, you're still underwhelmed. It's a bogey game. I've got this theory that like nearly every Kiwi dreams of one day retiring on the Gold Coast. So I don't know if in the back of the Warriors' minds when they play the Gold Coast, they just go into relaxation mode. You know what? I didn't mention as well, it's a bad loss made even worse by the fact that Harris Tavita, Fisher Harris, and Wade Egan all copped injuries and are out for this one. And those are big reasons why I am going to play the Finns here, who actually get bolstered by Nikorima, Kaufusi, and Nichols coming in after the bye. And it's an awesome game from the standpoint that you understand how much both teams need to win, and they're both very capable. But the reason I am backing my Finns, not just because I want them to get it done, but I see a clear advantage. The hammer out the back, he's in as great a form as any player in the world, as much as CNK, who returned last week as a machine. I've got Katoa, who is clearly the best halves player in this game, and with his preferred halves partner. I've got Herbie, who might be the first $1 million center. I've got the Kiwi 9, Marshall King, who is matching up against Sam Healy. I mean, you can argue for the Warriors. They're at home, and they are off a bad loss, so they'll be highly determined. But one of the advantages for the Warriors playing at home is the travel for the opponent. When you've got an opponent like the Dolphins who are off a bye and don't need any time this week attributed to recovery, it's not really too disruptive to have a travel day. or a half day for travel. So, look, I think the Dolphins should be favoured. I actually think they should be favoured by more than 1.5, which is why I've played it as a best bet. And it could be very tight late. It could be in the balance. And I think the sharper halves get it done for the Dolphins. I'm sure I'll meet some resistance in the comments. Do you see the Storm making the grand final this year? Yes, I do. Love the Finns lineup. Cody has been missed. Agree. JK, Warriors won't mess the bed at home 2 weeks in a row. Hate to go against you, but give me 225. I mean, that's the argument I'm probably going to make for Brisbane next game. I respect that. I think we're going to get New Zealand's best effort here, but that's going to be matched for the Dolphins' best effort. And I think the Dolphins have got more class right now. Adam, Wars have no points in them with 3 of their 4 spine members out, but defensively will be up for it off a loss. Don't know if there's many points. Like that angle too. So you could actually consider like a Warriors unders or just a game unders, because it could be a real finals intensity. And in fact, you've heard my best bet, but Benny has a pick on this game as well.
G'day TryPod fam. As always, thanks to the legends for having me on. A little bit of a skid row recently, going 0-3 with my last 3 try scorer tips. Trindle was on the inside, begging for that pass. Heroic effort in defence from the Bunnies last week, and the Sharks terrible, absolutely terrible. Watch him score this week. This week I was going to be tipping Harry Grant, who's got an absolutely phenomenal record against the Eels, and I will be having money on him. But officially for the TryPod, my TryPod pick of the week, I'm going to go the Finns, who have drifted into $1.82 on Ladbrokes from $2.10 since the team lists have dropped. And for me, side by side, Finns far superior unit this week. The Wires looking at a little bit of trouble at the moment with their current makeup. Wade Egan's out, Fisher Harris is out this week. The halves pairing not that great. Young Pup at 9. We've got Jeremy Marshall-King at 9 for the Finns. Hammersell at the back. Hot Boy Herbie. Nicarima's back this week too. Finns should be far too strong. $1.82. Great bet. Best of luck if you follow.
So Benny sees it exactly the same as myself. That line has been in flux for the last couple of hours. And if I could have potentially made it a best bet at $1.82. It's now into $1.67. So I would suggest you play it my way, which is minus 1.5 at $1.90. So you actually get 8 cents more than Benny's play, but you do risk the field goal win, because obviously like $1.82, that was probably available an hour or 90 minutes ago, but unfortunately, and I tell the guys to tip it after team lists, but I'm not sure if people weren't expecting Fisher Harris to be ruled out. We knew Egan got the concussion. So I think that the Fisher Harris news maybe has caught the market by surprise. And that's why we did get a flipped favourite. But I think rightfully so, the Dolphins should be favoured yet. And then my next best bet is on Brisbane, which is the TV game or Channel 9 game on Friday night. Brisbane's a 15.5 point favourite. Both of these teams, Broncos and Souths, lost by 2 points last week. South's slide is now at 8 straight games. Does everyone remember? I actually tipped the Bunnies for the wooden spoon pre-season, and then they went out won 3 of their first 4. Right? I wonder what price they got out to in that market. But on the back of 8 straight losses, and the Titans won last week, the Bunnies at $3.40 for the spoon. Brisbane had won 5 in a row. Of course, that streak was snapped, which does really hurt the Broncos' top 4 hopes, but not completely dashed yet. Speaking of hurt, you couldn't help but notice Haas in major discomfort yet again, and that's even after getting a rest. Madge downplayed it, but Madge loves to see these guys suffer, I feel. So I'm concerned, if I'm a Brisbane fan, about what Haas is able to produce for him in the home stretch. And of course, to win finals games, they need him to be massive like he was in Origin 1. Brisbane's only change, Haas is in there again. Brisbane's only change is both wingers. Cobbo and Mariner are in for Karapani and Arthurs. So I'll get to South. Someone's asking about White and Soap. So South's shocking injury run has continued. Totola hurt himself in the act of scoring with 2 minutes to go. Footy fan has rightfully questioned, why is Whiten there at 6? Isn't he suspended? So White has been named because he's fighting the charge at the judiciary tonight. That's another reason why I'm playing Brisbane as a best bet. I feel like the line is more so factoring Whiten in, and I think the line will increase even further if Whiten loses that fight. And I haven't read too much into the case. Give me your opinion in the comments, guys. I mean, I saw the shot you put on. I'm trying to remember now. Was it on Rudolph? It's one of those ones. It's a big collision, and if you want to find something illegal in it, you can potentially say like there's an argument it was a shoulder charge, right? But then there was maybe a partial wrap with the left arm, and sometimes when two players just come together with a lot of force, like it's really hard to make a wrapping action. And I've also you've got to acknowledge that Whiten got 10 in the bin at a pivotal moment, so he's already been punished partially for the hit. So Benny, I trust Benny's opinion, says Whiten will be suspended for sure. So I tend to think he will be as well. I wouldn't be going against Bunnies if I think he's going to get off, but I'm not certain either. But that's the explanation there. So if I'm looking at Rabbitohs, like, yes, Jai Gray's a handful. Johnston's all class. Love to see him surpass that try-scoring record this season. Souths have got grit about them for sure. But you've got Brisbane already off a home loss. At home again, same scenario, 2 or 3 try favourite. It just makes this an even stiffer circumstance for Bennett's troops. And I know they'd love to spoil the party in his old stomping ground, but I just don't see it happening. Brisbane have only played once this whole year with Walsh, Mam, Reynolds, Hunt, Haas, and Carrigan. And that was last week, and they lost. So you've got them all available again. Anything but a comprehensive Brisbane win would surprise me. So I'll bet on that outcome being the case. In the comments, no way that Fight and Whiten gets off. Dargans, Eels, Knights, Bunnies, all on 6 wins. Titans on 5 wins. Bunnies, Eels, and Souths all points differential within 4. So that's still up for grabs, that wooden spoon, which is something interesting, I suppose, for teams at the bottom of the ladder. Agree with the Brisbane best bets. Souths are cooked. Does Hunt work in this team? I mean, you've got to play him at 9, I think, for the highest ceiling for the side. You've got Walters that adds a point of difference and some utility off the bench. It's the right lineup. You can imagine it will take a little bit of time for these guys to gel because they haven't all been on the park. But I thought Brisbane was going to win well last week, and I didn't play that. And now I'm even more confident this week, confident enough to make it a best bet. Let's move to Saturday. It's Titans-Panthers, so I'll update the website that you can see on the screen. Panthers are minus 12.5. We've got the hottest team in the comp facing the 4-time premiers. Well, not quite. All right. The Titans did win last week for Dez's 500th. In some ways, does that infuriate you as a Gold Coast fan? You see what the team's capable of, even without, like, Fafita, without Tino. Why are they so underwhelming so many other weeks? Randall is out, but Verrill's in. I said before, hottest team in the comp. Because in my mind, that's Penrith. But I've got to say, I think the Raiders have won more in a row. I think the Raiders have won 8 or 9 in a row. I suppose the Raiders have had a lot more tight wins. Penrith's in 7th heaven, second longest winning streak in the comp. They were in wooden spoon position and now knocking on the door for the 4. Liam Martin returned from injury last week via the bench, where Penrith demolished West. This week, that is the only change, that Martin is starting. For those who believe Penrith's going to win the comp for a 5th straight time this year, you could argue this is the best team in the comp against the worst in the comp, right? I mean, Penrith's basically full strength. The Titans lost Kinney very early in the year. He was their best player last season. Tino is out. Fafita is underperforming and overlooked by the coach. Like, I have no interest in the Titans. I'm not playing the Gold Coast here. But this game does feel like a square punter's paradise. Because if you're a square punter, who are you backing? You're putting Penrith in your multis. You're definitely making Panthers-centric same gamers. You're going to pick plenty of points for Penrith. You're going to pick a lot of Panthers try scorers. And I will tell you, I nearly went a square best bet here. And my favourite way to play it would be Penrith over 28.5 at $1.88 on Ladbrokes and Neds. That's not a best bet, but it's the play I gave the most consideration. So it's a really strong lean because I just felt like, how does Penrith not score 30 plus on the fast deck at Seabus on Saturday afternoon? And the only reason I didn't end up backing it is I'm going to put it in the too obvious bin, which did save us a couple of losses last week, including Warriors minus 11.5. Felt a bit too obvious against the Gold Coast, right? So that's my expert analysis. I know that's pretty basic. I'm sitting here saying Penrith should win this well, and that's how I feel. But everybody agrees with that. And the point of difference with the TryPod is that if I see it the same as Jim and Joe at the pub, I'm probably not going to have the same bet as them. But enjoy your day, fellas. I'll sit this one out. Average footy fan, what's a square punter? Square punter is probably just someone that's not, the opposite of being sharp, and just someone who's going to play the most obvious outcome. They're going to play the team that they're going to play all the top teams, and they're going to play against all the bottom teams because it's obvious. They're going to play, same game multis with lots of obvious try scorers. They're going to play multis with head-to-heads, and it's just like we all know punters that bet like that. And you can't strongly disagree with any one of their bets of why it's blatantly wrong. But long term, none of those guys are going to profit by just picking the most popular selections, because the bookies are not going to give you any favors with the pricing on those sides, on those really popular sides. So my experience, and I punted on the NRL successfully for several years before I even started the TryPod. I feel like you've got to have a niche or an edge, and you've got to go against the grain somewhere to sort of pick off pricing. That is actually a plus expected return, right? Long term, that's actually going to profit for you. That's how we've been able to do it anyway. So sometimes it is as simple as, would somebody who bets all the obvious sides be on this bet? And if you know long term he's not going to win, why would you want the same bet as a guy who doesn't win long term? All right. Let's move to later Saturday, Dragons, Raiders. And the line is only 6.5, Canberra favoured. It's at Winnie Stadium. I got to always remember to roll the team list down so you can run your eye over 1 to 13 as well. It wasn't long ago at all. Was it like 3 weeks ago? These two met in Canberra and it came down to the wire. I was actually on for a best bet. I lost on that evening. I had the Raiders, I think, minus 11.5 or maybe even only 9.5, but they failed to cover that. It was a 4-point margin, I believe. Since then, Canberra have won back-to-back by 20 plus, and we were on as a best bet the last 2 weeks with Canberra, right? And both of those games were similar in that they both blew out late. Like Canberra didn't even lead in either of the last two games, and yet they won them both 20 plus. In terms of personnel, Molo is in for an injured Sewer. Chris is back at centre. Sasangi shifts to the bench for the Raiders. So I've been riding the Raiders. I think I've been on them basically every week for the last 4 weeks. And just as often, I've been fading St. George. And that did pay off for us last week. St. George didn't cover the line in Townsville. I actually played Cal's tries over, which was even easier because we won that before half-time, whereas the Dragons could have covered late. That obviously came down to the wire, a 6-point game. So my perspective, the way I evaluate these teams, I've liked the Raiders nearly every week in the recent run, and I've been against St. George thinking that the market overprices them. I'm hardly going to like St. George in this game, right? So I'm definitely not playing the Dragons. So why don't I play the Raiders? Well, it's pretty damn obvious, again, of a side, I have to say. If you did win money in the previous game on Penrith against the Titans, you probably rolling that money straight into the Raiders. So I'm just trying to figure out how the Dragons win this game. Who are the Dragons looking to turn the tables in this one? I'm pretty sure Val Holmes was still playing 3 weeks ago, and he's somewhat of a match winner for the Dragons, and was the goal kicker there, was the only Origin player. On paper, you can only side with the green machine here. So I'll try and argue for St. George. They're at home. They are a side that typically fights very hard. Canberra could be in cruise control. Someone brought up motivation for the Raiders, but I would say, yeah, you're only 2 points ahead of second, and you definitely want to, be able to control your destiny and keep the other contenders at arm's length. So I strongly considered -6.5. I've mentioned Starling before. He's having a career season, and then if you take Starling off, Paddy's coming on. He's a star in the making. You've got Weeks getting better and better each week. It's a reluctant pass for me because it is, again, it just feels a bit too public. And for all the reasons I just explained, basically, of why I'm not playing Penrith, I'm not going to play the Raiders against the Dragons either. But sometimes the easy ones and the obvious ones do get up as well. So you let me know how you see this. Like, is that a fill-up playing the Raiders, or am I missing something? So several people also reckon that line is a little bit fishy for the Dragons. I mean, I know that the Dragons did beat the Storm at home earlier this year, but I felt like potentially there was a little bit more firepower for St. George back then. It is a suspiciously low line, and I have been against Dragons nearly every week and on Raiders, so maybe I should just continue that. But because the Raiders are off a couple of big wins, I feel like the markets should be catching up with them. So again, bookies aren't trying to give away any easy money here, so I'll move on because I have got a best bet in the next game. Comment: Raiders were as high as $1.55 before teams. I don't understand. How is the line -6.5? Feel like Dragons could chuck it in or shake off the shackles and play free-flying, fun, careless footy. I could definitely see that as well, Siebes. You've got a team that's been fighting really hard every week and falling short. One of these weeks, the Dragons will fall totally flat and get blown out by somebody. But you also saw last week that to get the best out of some of these players, they're just being told to express themselves and to not die wondering. And they did still score, 32 points on the road last week. Ryan, I'm taking Raiders second half alt lines. Yeah. So, a game like this, the Raiders are only going to be a 3.5 point favorite in the second half. And you could magnify that and play like a -9.5 or a -15.5 second half. The Raiders have won the last two second halves by 4 tries. So they're running over the top of teams. And Saturday night, that'll be my third and final best bet. It is another big game. It's Seagulls Roosters at 4 Pines. And the line is 2.5 everywhere. So just to remind myself, Dabble, Ladbrokes, Neds. I think it's 2.5 in other places, but it might be slightly under $1.90. It might be like $1.85 or something. So Manly came back to earth after 3 in a row. They had that outstanding win versus the Storm, but then a week later, you get destroyed by the Dogs. Now, what do you make of Seabold rolling the dice with Hamole and his justification that the training staff, the medical staff said it was only a 90% chance of re-injury? This is this is just about your best player. Obviously, on his day, it should be Turbo, but Hamole is the best forward, young star, cornerstone of this club. I can only assume that Siebes misspoke. I couldn't believe my ears when he said, well, it was 90%, so we felt we had to risk it given that it's a must-win game. I agree with that much. And honestly, if I'm going to be really cynical, I'm going to say Seabold knows he's probably out if they don't make the finals. So he's thinking, what's the difference between 90% chance? I'm 0% of coaching next year. And I already made this joke in the comments. Seabold is also saying there's a 100% chance we're all going to die one day, so who really cares? Right? Waddell starts second row in place of Olaquatu. Massive loss. I know he'd only been back for one game, but it's deflating that you lose him again. Billy Smith and Savala back on deck for the Roosters, who I'm not going to say really anything kind about the Roosters. They got it done for my best bet last week, but the Roosters bottled that game. Considering who was out for Melbourne, the position the Roosters got him in, I don't want to give the Roosters too much credit for 30 points against Melbourne because, as I said, 4 of the 5 tries are off kicks, a little bit of luck in that. So the Roosters, once again, blow a game that should have got the 2 points in. It could ultimately cost them, but in saying that, if the Roosters win here, they're still very much in the finals hunt, and Radley's also in the reserves there. And on the back of each of these teams losing in round 21, pressure is really high. You've got now both sides on the outside looking in. So this is 9th versus 10th. And I'm telling you, it's going to come down to maybe points difference. It's going to come down to one game for a few teams at the end of the year, whether they are in or out of the finals. So you've got Seagulls, Roosters, definitely Dolphins. And I'm trying to think who else is around that. Because I think Cronulla's been getting better results. I suppose you put Brisbane as not being completely safe, but I feel like Brisbane and Penrith have strung along several wins in the last sort of 6 weeks. That, yeah, maybe it is as simple as Dolphins, Seagulls, Roosters, and that's 3 teams fighting for one spot, and it'll come down to round 27 in all likelihood. So, these are 4-point games when these sides meet each other. And it's just my overall opinion that I've shared throughout this year that goes on the line here, because I think the Tricolours are the better side. Look at the team list there. I think they both got firepower in the back 5, even if you want to call that a wash. I like Sam Walker over DCE at this point. It's actually a curious decision for the Roosters to be signing DCE, which is the rumor at this stage, right? The Roosters have the better pack for mine. Got the wiser coach for sure. And while this is in front of a parochial Four Pines crowd, the Roosters have that extra 3 days of preparation leading into this massive game, which I think more than counteracts that point. I think the Roosters will win. I think the market still slightly overrates Manly. The evidence I can submit for that is a week ago, the Seagulls were a 2.5-point favorite. The Seagulls were only 2.5-point underdogs for a home Canterbury game in front of Canterbury members. Like, you're telling me the market was saying that Manly is only 2 points away from the Bulldogs? Right, so of course we hammered that for a best bet. Padonis was on it as well. I think someone commented, has he given his tip? He actually texted me and said he's had some stuff come up. He doesn't have a play for us this week, but he did. He was on that Dogs tip as well. So it's another case of when the sharpshooters align with the best bet, the record is we're winning 4 out of every 5, something like 80%. That's been one of the great advantages of adding the sharpshooters to the TryPod show every week. So the market was wrong about Manly a week ago, clearly. And you would expect a bit of a downgrade there, but I still believe that the market generally inflates the Seagulls. That's why I'm going to take the +2.5 in a game where I think this is WTF. I think wrong team favored. I think the Roosters will win. We don't need them to necessarily for the best bet. Let's move to Sunday at CommBank. West Tigers against the Bulldogs, who I just mentioned after they bullied Manly. So these are two sides, opposite ends of the ladder and on opposite ends of floggings last week. Buller is back for the Tigers. Sorry, I can scroll. You can see that, but I'll try and show you more of the sides there. Taruva returns to the wing. Samuela Fayunu is also a welcome inclusion. Connor Tracy could be out for a month with an abdominal issue he sustained against Manly. So Kira slides to fullback. Rinakama, who had the match-winning try in each of his last 2 starts, is on the wing. I've got no interest in playing the Tigers. They were toothless against Penrith, and they're going to meet a similar level of resistance and intensity here. I have to admit, just going back to that Dogs-Manly game, because I'm really high on the Bulldogs and I don't rate Manly, I played -2.5. Of course, I want the best bet to win, but I would have loved the Dogs to just win that by a try, and rather than a total romp, so that people kept respecting Manly a bit more and maybe kept on questioning the Bulldogs. You sort of, that's getting very greedy, but like I prefer, even though I could say, oh, it makes me look smarter and makes me look even more right, I'd way rather the best bets just narrowly won each week, so that the value could maybe sustain a little bit longer. I don't want to hit you with that O word again, but it's an obvious favorite that I can't really knock. If I'm going to try and argue how the Tigers win or keep this close, I'm going to say, yeah, they're a lot better with Buller back. You got Luai, you got 3 Fayunu brothers, you got 2 May brothers now, you got Appy, Dewey. I quite like at 13 there. That's a fair bit of X factor. And when you have players like that, they can create something out of nothing. They can put on a slick play that you're going to need against an elite defensive outfit. And they could make this a decent game, but I could just as easily see more of the same from the boys from Belmore as last week, who are pushing for top 2 because they want to avoid a trip south, whether that's to Melbourne or to Canberra. And you would expect the Dogs take care of business. Although Luke says West would be the only way I could go. Ryan says I could see it being close for 30 minutes. So with 11.5-point line, if you like the Tigers, yeah, maybe you wait around and see if that gets to 12.5. That means you'll get a 6.5 first half, which could be a strong angle. One game to go. Sharks, Cowboys, 4 p.m. Sunday. Let me slide down to that on the screen. So it's a Shark Stadium, and these sides both won narrowly last week. Cronulla are a 7.5-point favourite over North Queensland. 2 big inclusions for Cronulla after that tight win in Gosford. Nickera and Talakai are returning. Clifford is in for the Cowboys, who won that shootout over St. George. In terms of the latter implications, Cronulla are quietly going about their business. You may not have realised, after a lot of people sort of wrote Cronulla off mid-season, that the Sharks still have a real shot at top 4 with a very manageable draw against teams like North Queensland, who might not have much to play for. As for the Cowboys, I said a week ago they're essentially dead, but they probably don't feel that way because of the tie that the Cowboys got. And the Cowboys, I think, now have 7 wins. If they win the final 5 games, 12 wins and a draw probably sneaks you in. So I mentioned, I think the final spot in the 8 comes down between Manly, Roosters, and Dolphins. But the Cowboys are mathematically still in it. Let's put it that way. So they're on the tightrope, which could make this a desperation game for the Cowboys. And I'll go a step further and say you still have Drinky, Purdue, Dearden, Robson, Nanai, Cotter. I'm not going to write the Cowboys off for this game. But, of course, I hold Cronulla in high regard too. And I think the bookies do respect the Sharkies. A week ago, Cronulla was a 13-point favourite and only won by 2, but still come into this game as a 7.5-point favourite, which is about right in my estimation, because the Sharks are at home and definitely have the far superior pack. And I think that should see Cronulla win by at least 1 try, perhaps crack the Cowboys late and extend that margin. But I didn't have a high conviction in that game, so that's where I'll wrap it. Cole says Dogs 13 plus, Tigers are woeful and self-destruct. And look, I could dwell on a few more comments there. Ryan says he's staying away from Sharks Cowboys, but we've gone a strong 53 minutes. Somebody did ask me to do a section on futures betting, and I have been playing with the ladder predictor, but I already felt like we had a bit to get over tonight, and I did want to put out that call to action again. If you are in a position where you've been considering dabble for a little while, but you haven't pulled the trigger yet, just getting in before the end of July could be advantageous and could help the pod out as well. So let me put those contact information on the screen, and once again, and let me leave you there, guys. Let me know what you think of the 4 best bets. Let me know what you find to be the best play of this weekend for yourself. Enjoy your week, and I'll be back in 7 days to break it all down again. Cheers, guys. Lego.